Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a green and colorless ramp deck, and it's been quite a while since we've last looked at a ramp deck. It's been since the banning of Monvuli Acid Moss, which changed the game for the better. But now we added a bunch of new ramp cards, especially Druid of the Cowl from Revolt is a nice new 2-mana ramp card that can let us cast our 4-drops on turn 3 more consistently, and that allowed us to take another look at a ramp deck here with, of course, the Eldrazi as a sub-theme. So let's take a look at the entire deck, starting out with Walking Ballista, another addition from Revolt, and this card does a lot of work in the deck, since in the early game you can just use this as a removal spell, take out an annoying flyer for example, but in the late game, once you've got 10 or 12 mana, you can make this into a huge threat that can threaten to close out the game very quickly, and of course also take down opposing creatures. Then we've got Deathcap Cultivator, one of the many 2-mana ramp cards in the deck. So for 2 mana we get a 2-1 that adds black or green to our mana pool, so we can cast a 4-mana spell on turn 3. Also has Delirium, which could come up, but this is not really a Delirium deck. Then we're also playing 1 copy of Duskwatch Recruiter, which is an excellent mana sink in the late game, since for 3 mana we can look at the top 3 cards looking for a creature. So if we've got 10 or 12 mana, we can use this multiple times in the same turn, looking for more action. And of course this can also transform into the Howler, so if the opponent doesn't play a spell on their turn, especially in the early game, if we can transform the Howler, we could be able to cast our spells even sooner. So just an excellent one-off to have access to that we can also search up with the Woodland Bellower, which we'll get to in a second. Then I've already covered the Druid of the Cowl. The advantage here over the Deathcap Cultivator is the 3 toughness, so it's a little more resilient to cheap removal spells, but of course if you're on the offensive plan it only has 1 power, but still a very serviceable card. We're also playing a Ruin in Their Wake, which is the additional 2-mana ramp spell that you can only really play if you're playing the green and colorless version of the ramp deck. If you're playing green and red, for example, then Ruin in Their Wake is not going to be as effective, since you need that wastes in play in order to be able to put the land into play tapped, otherwise you're not really ramping. So Ruin in Their Wake, the primary reason to go into colorless, as well as of course some of the powerful Eldrazi that have colorless mana requirements. So this gives us a total of 7 plus 2 is 9 2-mana ramp spells that allow us to cast our 4-drops a turn sooner, which as you'll see is quite important in this deck. We're also playing Nissa Vastwood Seer, which goes well into this kind of deck, looking for a forest, making sure we can keep hitting our land drops, and can also transform into Sage Animist, allowing us to draw some more cards. We're also playing Tireless Tracker, mainly for the ability to get clues whenever we play a land. If we can stick a Tireless Tracker and the following turn play a ramp spell, put multiple lands into play, that's a great way to get ahead on cards and then hopefully take over the game from there. We're also playing 1 copy of Reclamation Sage against those pesky artifacts and enchantments. Can also search it up with the Woodland Bellower, as we'll get to. We also have 3 copies of Nissa's Pilgrimage, which is another excellent ramp spell, because not only does it look for a forest and put it into play tapped, we can also look for a forest and put it into our hand. So not only are we ramping, but we're also making sure that we can keep hitting our land drops in the following turns. And if we do enable Spell Mastery, we even get the additional land into our hand, so a total of 3 lands for just 1 card. That's kind of card advantage, even though the cards are lands. Then of course Thought-Knot Seer, the excellent follow-up to a turn 2 ramp spell, since you can disrupt your opponent, put a 4/4 into play, and then further your game plan of ramping into even bigger stuff. So this can exile a card from the opponent's hand, but when he leaves the battlefield, the opponent will get a card back, not the one you exiled, but a random one off the top of their deck. Then another excellent 4-drop that we can play on turn 3 often is From Beyond, making an Eldrazi Scion token every turn, which also kind of ramps us. And then later in the game, once we have a lot of mana, we can sacrifice the From Beyond, looking for any Eldrazi, and often that's gonna be Ulamog, which can close out the game. We also have Explosive Vegetation that we could play on turn 3 following a turn 2 ramp spell, so this can look for 2 additional basic lands and put them into play tapped. So this does also include Wastes, which are basic lands, so we can go from having access to 4 mana to having access to maybe 7 mana on the following turn, so this is a very powerful ramp spell. But I don't think we want to have the full 4 copies, because otherwise we run the risk of having too many ramp spells and not enough action. Speaking of action, we've got Verderous Gearhulk, which is a 5 mana 4/4 with trample, putting 4 +1/+1 counters on our creatures. So worst case scenario, this is just a 5 mana 8/8 trample, which is not bad. We also have a Reality Smasher, which is great at taking down planeswalkers thanks to the trample and haste, and of course the opponent will have a hard time removing the Reality Smasher. We are also playing a Nissa Vital Force, and especially her ultimate ability is very powerful in this deck, since we would end up drawing a card whenever a land enters a battlefield under our control, which in a ramp deck of course is a lot of lands. Then the Woodland Bellower, which I've talked about, can find any of our cheap green creatures, so this includes Tireless Tracker, but also that one-off Duskwatch Recruiter, or maybe a Reclamation Sage if there's an annoying enchantment or artifact. So can do a lot of things, can even search just for a ramp creature if we need more mana for some reason. So just a very powerful card. We also have Ulvenwald Hydra, which is a 6 mana star with power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control. Also has reach, so can block those pesky Smuggler's Copters, for example, and also can search for any land when he enters a battlefield, so this can look for our utility lands, which we do have a number of. Then Rishkar's Expertise, another powerful new addition from Aetherwind. This does require some setup, because we can draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, so if we don't have any giant creatures in play, then this does nothing. But as soon as we even have like a Thought-Knot Seer, which is 4 power, we can already start drawing 4 cards, but the more power of course the better. And also we can cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost, which is of course great after you've drawn a bunch of extra cards, so we can put maybe a Reality Smasher into play for free and further our game plan. Then another exciting addition from Aetherwind is Aetherwind Basker, 4 and triple green for a 7/7 trample that gets us an energy whenever he enters a battlefield or attacks for each creature we control. So with all those mana creatures, that can add up quite a bit. And then we can pay an energy to give the Basker +1/+1 until end of turn, so it doesn't take much for the Basker to just kill the opponent in one attack after we've gained a bunch of energy. And of course also works very well with Rishkar's Expertise, since we can even use this after combat to get even more cards. Then we have Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. This is the card we're most often gonna get with From Beyond, and just a great finisher, being able to exile 2 permanents when we cast him. Indestructible, so the opponent needs very specific removal to remove Ulamog. And whenever he attacks, the opponent has to exile the top 20 cards, so it only takes 2 attacks for Ulamog to kill someone regardless of a life total. And we also have Kozilek, the Great Distortion, which is another 10 mana Eldrazi, has double Colorless in the mana requirement, but that's not a problem in this deck. And he draws us a bunch of cards when we cast him, so we can refuel our hand. Has Menace 12/12, and we can discard a card with converted mana cost equal to a spell that's being cast to counter that spell, so another very powerful ability. Then our mana base, very simple, 14 forests, 7 wastes to enable those ruin in their wakes and in order to cast our colorless Eldrazi. Then 1 Westvale Abbey, so if we're kind of flooding out in the late game, we can at least spend 5 mana to make a 1/1. If we've got a bunch of creatures we can sacrifice, we can turn it into Ormondal Profane Prince. And we also have 1 copy of Rogue's Passage to make our large creatures unblockable if we have to. And of course also Colorless land for our Eldrazi. So no tap lands as you can see, so that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks quite good here. We're on the play, we have a Wastes in case we draw our Ruin in their wake. We've got a 2-mana ramp spell into some powerful cards. We could run into the double Nissa problem, but we'll deal with it if it gets to that. So Explosive, an excellent draw if our Druid survives here. Opponent could have a Fatal Push end of turn for all we know. Doesn't look like it. So if we can resolve the Vegetation next turn, we can really get going. Opponent with just a Eager Construct, so they could be on an artifact deck of sorts. And a Wastes on top, I think, yeah, I'll take that. Could use some more natural land drops. So let's play the Wastes, play an Explosive, and I think we get a Waste and a Forest here, since we still have this Basker that's triple green in our hand. And usually you want to get the Wastes out of the deck, since Nissa's Pilgrimage is a ramp card that only gets forests, and especially in the late game with Spell Mastery, you can get quite a few forests out of the deck. But you still want to make sure that you can cast your green spells that you have in hand. So the opponent with a Filigree Familiar attacks us for 2. Alright, so we could actually cast the Basker here if we want to. Could also go Nissa, make our land into a 5/5. And then next turn we could potentially ultimate. Opponent does have access to red and black mana, so they could have unlicensed disintegrations. But those are bad. Even if we play Nissa, make a land, they can kill the land, redirect damage to Nissa, and attack Nissa with both. We can block 1, Nissa takes 2 down to 1, so she wouldn't be dead. If we play the Basker and they have disintegration, they just kill the Basker. So I think I prefer playing Nissa here. Also, if they kill this Nissa, we still have a second Nissa, so let's play the Nissa, and I think we untap a Wastes here, since I would prefer having those forests for the Basker. And we're just gonna play defense here. So no attacks. Sulfur Falls from the opponent. No attacks, that's good. Alright, I think we just want to ultimate this Nissa here. Get our emblem. Can play a Rune in their wake. Just to check for counter spells. That works. And draw a card from the emblem. Explosive Vegetation. So we could play Nissa and transform her here. But I think I want to go with the Explosive here. Draws a bunch more cards. And draw another one. And play another Druid. Alright, not a bad turn. And now we just have the card advantage going, and sooner or later one of our big win conditions will stay in play, and then hopefully win the game from there. We can block one of these 2/2s, take 2 down to 16. Another Eager Construct is probably not gonna do it. And yeah, I'll take a Rishkar's Expertise. Implement of Combustion. So the opponent might be on an improvised deck. And let's see here, we've got 12, 13 mana, so we could go Basker into Rishkar's Expertise. There's not a ton of removal spells our opponent can have that would mess with that plan. Alternatively, if we want to get greedy, we can play the Basker, try and attack with it next turn, get it a bunch of extra power and toughness, and then play the Rishkar's Expertise. But I don't think we have to go that deep. This looks like a fine window to try and resolve the Basker and the Expertise. Duskwatch also great here with all this extra mana. But let's just try and see if this works. Get some energy and then just play the Expertise. Alright, that works, and we put a Reality Smasher, I think, into play. Yeah, looks fine. And might as well attack. So things are going swimmingly here. We even have to discard at the end step. And I think we won't need this Deathcap Cultivator and I guess one of these lands. Alright, there's the Disintegration. Can take out our Basker, take 3 because they have an artifact in play. So it does set us back a bunch, but I think we'll manage. Just have to keep our life total in mind. So we could play another Reality Smasher here. Don't quite have enough mana to play From Beyond, sacrifice it and play Ulamog, but we're getting close. Kozilek could counter future removal spells potentially. But of course the cast trigger here is not gonna do much since our hand is full. So let's actually play a land, see what happens. Does not let us maybe transform the Nissa anymore, but we do have still some ramp spells that can transform her. So let's see, we've got 12, 13, 14 mana to work with. So if we play a Smasher, can attack for 10, could still play Nissa, play a ramp spell, maybe make a 4/4 with the Nissa. Is that all better than just playing a Kozilek and having maybe counterspell backup? Having that counterspell backup is nice. Yeah, I think since we have so much card advantage, we just want to make sure that we don't die here randomly. So I think I'm gonna just cast this Kozilek. Now that we have counterspell backup, so we have a 2 mana card, a 3 mana card, a 5 mana card, so maybe we want to keep the 4 casting cost card for Kozilek purposes. So that means we can play a 2 or a 3 drop here. So let's play a Nissa here. Puts another creature into play, can transform her next turn if we want to. Alright, and just say go here. I'm not even going to attack with the Reality Smasher. So the opponent needs a very specific set of cards here to beat us. And a 6 mana card, yeah, that's gonna slip through the cracks unfortunately. And it's a pretty good one, Marionette Master. And let's see, yep, they go with the +1/+1 counters, so we're actually in a bit of trouble here. We do need to find our Ulamog as soon as possible, which means we have to play our 4 casting cost card here. I think we play a land and transform Nissa. And maybe try and draw into the Ulamog. I think we can plus here. Let's see, are we dead next turn if our opponent just attacks with everyone? No, because we have these 1/3s that don't actually kill the 2 power creatures, but it's getting pretty close. So let's see, do we have to play the From Beyond here? We might have to. We've got 13, 14, 15 mana. So if we actually reveal a land off of Nissa and put it into play, then we have enough mana to play Sacrifice and cast Ulamog. So I think we plus here. Alright, that's a land. So let's just double check to make sure. So 13, 14, 15, 16. So yeah, that should work. Play. Sacrifice. And let's see here, we also drew this Rogue's Passage, so we could make our 12-12 unblockable, but I don't think there's a way we can win the game this turn. So yeah, let's just cast Ulamog, get rid of the Marionette Master, and could get rid of a land if our opponent only, let's say, has one red source, but they have multiple. So let's just get rid of the Familiar in that case. And now I feel pretty safe attacking. So let's attack with both, since this threatens lethal. Still have the Kozilek in play to maybe counter a removal spell from the opponent. Alright, they're forced to block. They take a whole bunch of damage, down to 2. Discard a land. Alright, so I think we got there. But it definitely was closer than I would have liked it to be. Don't have a 7 mana card in hand, unfortunately, but it's not a big problem here. Can just discard a Vegetation. And with all the Eldrazi in play, can just make one unblockable if we want to, but it's not even necessary. Attack with everyone. And the fun part about Ulamog, you get to take a peek at the opponent's deck. So yeah, looks like an improvise / artifact deck. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks pretty good. We're on the play, we've got a 2 mana ramp spell, and we've got some good 4-drops to follow up. We even have the choice between Ruin in their Wake and Druid. And I think we'll just go with the safer play that can't be killed by removal spells, especially when our opponent's black-blue. And we do have the wastes to go with the Ruin in their Wake. And there's not a lot of ways our opponent can interact with us playing out the From Beyond next turn. And if our opponent is just blue and black, they don't have a lot of ways to destroy the From Beyond once it is in play. So looking pretty good here. Also have the option of going Duskwatch plus Druid. But I think just playing the From Beyond here is good enough. Opponent with a Telling Time response, just looking at their top cards. No big deal. So now that we have a 1/1 Scion token coming every turn and eventually an Ulamog, we just have to try and not die to whatever the opponent is doing, with a lot of tap lands in the early game here. So I think we can just smash our opponent. Also could go Thought-Knot Seer, but that seems worse against potential Languish next turn. Same with playing out these 2-drops, so I think I just prefer smashing. So opponent already down to 15. A Languish will not kill a Reality Smasher, neither will something like a Grasp of Darkness. So the opponent needs pretty specific answers here. Get another Scion token, another Thought-Knot Seer. I think we want to attack first and then play the Thought-Knot Seer. Alright, opponent has a murder. That's fine, they have to discard a card as well to the Reality Smasher. Otherwise the murder gets countered. And that's a card I haven't seen much before. Interesting. Opponent only takes 1. And yeah, let's play the Thought-Knot and see what the opponent is working with. Alright, a million counterspells and an Imprisoned in the Moon, which is kind of a removal spell, I guess, but also kind of ramps us in a way. So might want to take the Glimmer or the Imprisoned in the Moon. I think I'll go with the Imprisoned and just try and kill our opponent as quickly as possible here. And I think we want to play the Duskwatch here as well. So the opponent has 3 counterspells and a draw spell, but they're facing quite the army on the ground. We know they drew that land, so yeah. And could even just search up a Reality Smasher here if we want to, but there's no real need. Could also just use the Duskwatch, since I don't think we're playing the Thought-Knot into a counterspell anyways, so might as well draw some more cards. Find a Druid. Alright, I guess we can play this into a counterspell. And our opponent can't awaken their Scatter to the Winds because that's 6 mana. So can just attack with everyone here. The best thing our opponent might do here is just cast a Glimmer of Genius. Yeah, might as well play the Druid. And could still play the Thought-Knot, but yeah, that's just gonna get countered, so... Alright, the opponent does play the Glimmer. Looking for lots of removal spells. But looks like they didn't find one. So yeah, the turn 3 From Beyond did a lot of work, and of course the Reality Smasher was pretty good as well. So no need to do anything fancy pre-combat, just attack with everyone, see what happens. Alright, that works. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which unfortunately doesn't have the wastes to go with the Ruin in their wake, but otherwise looks acceptable, I think. We've got the tracker into potentially Explosive Vegetation. We have a Ballista which can come down early. Alright, there we go, wastes right on time. So we will be able to play Ruin in their wake next turn. Opponent on black probably has more than one color if they're playing Evolving Wilds. Alright, so blue-black into a Glynness Crane. Let's see if the Crane can find any artifacts. Finds a Sky Sovereign, that's quite the artifact the Crane found. I don't think a Crane can carry a Sky Sovereign, but that's another question. Alright, so let's just play the Ruin in their wake, and then next turn we might be able to go Tireless Tracker into a land, and I think we need a Wastes here, and put that into play tapped and say go. And the awkward part about playing with Ballista, of course, is that you have to spam the continue button so you don't give away that you have a Ballista in hand. Alright, Contraband Kingpin from the opponent. And an Aether Hub, and they're gonna hit us for 1. So far so good. Doesn't look like the opponent's gonna be able to kill the Tireless Tracker here. At least not right away. And could even just play the Explosive Vegetation here if we wanted to. That certainly would be a more explosive start. But let's see, next turn then we would have 6 mana, and then we could go Tireless Tracker, play a land, and play Rune in their wake. Yeah, I think that seems better. Of course, we give up on the potential of a lot of clues by having the Tireless Tracker in play first, but I don't think that's a big deal, since we've got a lot of ways to take over the late game. Opponent gets in for 2. And says go. So they could also be holding on to a counterspell here for all we know. But if their counterspell is a Metallic Rebuke, we can still pay for it if we play the Tireless Tracker here. So yeah, I think we still go with the Tireless Tracker first, even though it might get countered. And then play a land, play Rune in their wake, play Druid of the Cowl. Let's see if this works. So far so good. Play a land. Get a clue. Alright, so now I think we can Rune in their wake. Try and get another clue out of the deal. So the opponent doesn't seem to have a removal spell here for the tracker. And I think we do play the Druid over sacrificing a clue here. And this might get... nope, alright, so the opponent just has a Glimmer of Genius. That's fine. So now we've got plenty of mana to work with. We even have 2 clues. And a Walking Ballista at the ready. Land number 5 for the opponent, gets in for 1 with the Crane. Drops us to 16. But no other play. And Nissa is quite a draw, so let's play the Rogue's Passage, get our clue. And let's see, do we want to play a Nissa? Would still be playing around Metallic Rebuke, so that's good. Yeah, I think we just go for it. Does it resolve? Nope. Confirm Suspicions, that's quite a counterspell for the opponents. They get 3 clues for their trouble. And they get to scry a bunch with the Kingpin. But now we get to attack with Tireless Tracker. And sacrifice 2 clues. Probably want to tap our Colorless mana here, just in case. And Nissa's Pilgrimage. Alright, I think I want to actually cast the Pilgrimage here, get some more clues. And we even get Spell Mastery, so another land. And say go. So the opponent has a bunch of clues, we have a bunch of clues. But the ramp deck should have a better late game than the artifact control deck. We'll see. Opponent gets in for 2. And says go. So they're just sitting on their counter spells. But we have clues that we can sacrifice, so we're not in a hurry. So let's sacrifice 1. And I think we can sacrifice another one here. Alright, Nissa is an interesting one. So we already played our land, so we can't transform Nissa unless we also play a ramp spell this turn. So I think we can still just sacrifice another clue here. Thought-Knot Seer is an interesting draw. So I think now we can attack with both. See what happens. No effects from the opponent, so I think we actually sacrifice this last clue as well. Doesn't look like the opponent has removal for the tracker, so might as well get in for more damage. And alright, let's give them maybe a cultivator to counter. Is this where they play their Metallic Rebuke? Or nope, they're just gonna sacrifice some clues. Could still have a Rebuke here. Nope, they're just sacking all their clues. So next turn we have the potential of playing Thought-Knot Seer, and either it resolves and we see what the opponent is working with, or it gets countered, and then we can maybe resolve a Nissa or Walking Ballista. Alright, the opponent with a Jace and Reveler of Secrets and -2 on the Tireless Tracker to return it to our hand. Alright, we're not gonna block here, so take 2 down to 12. Opponent has to discard to hand size, that's always a nice problem to have. Discards a Scrap Heap Scrounger. Alright, let's see here. So we've got a lot of cards, but they're all in our hand, so we need to find a way to deploy them. Can definitely attack Jace here with both creatures to take it out. So I think this is a good time to play our Thought-Knot Seer and see what the opponent has in hand. Alright, so let's see here. Another Confirmed Suspicions, Battle at the Bridge, Sky Sovereign, Smuggler's Sculptor. Battle at the Bridge is the only real removal spell. And then the Confirmed Suspicions, which I think we can play around. Alright, so I think we take the Battle at the Bridge here, which is the only real removal spell, and then try to win the game with what we can resolve this turn, so we don't need to play into the Confirmed Suspicions. I think we can go Tracker into Nissa, into Transform Nissa, into play Duskwatch, since the opponent hasn't showed us any sweeper effects. So yeah, let's play the Tracker. Let's play the Nissa. And the opponent might be able to take out the Nissa with the Sky Sovereign. But if they do, then they're tapped out and we can resolve a big Walking Ballista. Get a clue, transform Nissa. And I think, let's see, we might also want to make a 4/4 here, but then Nissa dies to just an attack from the Crane, so that doesn't force our opponent to play the Sky Sovereign. So I think plussing Nissa is fine here. Find a Reality Smasher, that's also good to know about. And then attack Jace. Alright, looks like the opponent's seen enough. Take out the Jace and then play the Duskwatch. And then next turn we've got both a Reality Smasher and a giant Walking Ballista at the ready. And by having more mana we can just deploy more threats in the same turn. Even though we both have pretty full hands, our opponent only has so much mana to work with. So they do go for the Sky Sovereign, and if they attack with the Crane they can take out the Nissa, but they're just gonna die on the way back if they do. So Nissa down. And alright, Aetherwind Basker, also a nice one here. So let's see, we've got 12, 13, 14, 15 mana. So that's a Walking Ballista for 7 if we wanted to. Opponent has a 1/4 lifelinker on defense. Let's say that blocks the Thought-Knot Seer, they go to 11. But they still take a whole bunch of damage, so I think the best way here is to just play the Reality Smasher. Could also make one of our creatures unblockable. with the Rogue's Passage. But let's just attack with everyone and then play Walking Ballista if our opponent's not dead yet. And our opponent's dead. Alright, sweet. I wanna thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day.